I'm a nurse and I just wanted them to put the fluid back in. Just pump me some fluid back in, that'd be fine. Push the cord back in. There must be something that they can do. So I rang my husband and told him to get back quickly, and he came back and I told him, and we were just in shock and we didn't know what to do next. We wanted a second opinion, and eventually about 7:30 we saw a consultant, and he explained the situation and our options. He said, and he was very matter of fact, which is what we needed. He said, there's only one outcome, which is not good, but the sooner we act, the better for you. He said, and I remember his word, he said, I have ladies on the intensive care unit that have got an infection of the womb, and the only way we can get rid of that infection is to remove their womb. He said, and I don't want that to happen to you. And the minute he said that, we decided that yes, that's what we would do. They then scanned me again. Well, no, not again, because I hadn't had a scan, but they scanned me, and we didn't know the sex of the baby at the time. And there she was at the bottom of my womb, just lying against at the bottom. There was not a drop of water there, not a drop of amniotic fluid, and her heart was still going, and that was at 7:30 that night. So that was really, really difficult to deal with, knowing that our next actions would basically kill our baby. That was a really, really difficult thing to decide to do. But we were given the option, we were given good advice and realistic advice. But then we stayed in the side room till about 6 o'clock the next morning. The sister on duty did keep coming in and saying, I'm so sorry, we're so busy and I don't want you to be in a room giving birth with midwives flitting in and out. She wanted somebody to be with us all the time. And so we were eventually moved at 6 o'clock the next morning, and we had our own midwife, and then I had the pessary. I had a lot of blood taken, then we had the pessaries put in at 6:30, and she said that it may take up to 6 to 12 hours for contractions to start. Excuse me. But within 40 minutes they were coming, and they were painful, very painful. And then the midwife swapped over and had another midwife, and I had a lady supporting that midwife as well, and they were absolutely brilliant. They were so, so good. I couldn't have wished for better. They were so caring and so young. It was about 14. But they were so, so lovely and so caring, very gentle, and were with us all the time. There was one period where I was being sick, and this is what sticks in my mind. I mean, everybody, I assume, on the staff side know that I was in that room and what we were going through. And I was being sick, and my husband, I said to him to get me another bowl. So he went out and asked the sister that was in dark blue to get us a bowl, and she brought another bowl in and said, oh well, it's all a good sign. And that has stayed with me. That was so inappropriate, because a good sign of what? So I was about to deliver my dead baby. That's all I could think of. And so I gave my husband strict instructions not to let her come back in again. And it's a throwaway comment like that, although the care the rest of the time was absolutely lovely. It's that throwaway comment that sticks with me, that just think before you speak. I'm sure she didn't mean anything by it. She probably meant that things were progressing, but I didn't want them to progress. I didn't want it to happen. So, but anyway, that's beside the point. So I gave birth, and she'd already passed, and that was my hope, really. I didn't want her to have been born with a heart beating, because and I've just had to sit there and wait for it to stop, which would have been horrendous. So I held her, and we found out she was a girl, because we didn't know. My husband was in bits, and then my husband had to hold, well, not had to, but wanted to hold her. He was worried it beforehand. We discussed it. Once we knew what was going to happen the next day, or later on, we discussed what we were going to do and whether we wanted to hold her or touch her, and we just didn't know. We didn't know what to expect. We didn't know what we'd want to do. But it just feels so natural that there's nothing else that you want to do other than hold her. So he held her while they tried to get the placenta out, which was worse than the birth, because obviously the placenta wasn't ready to come out. There was nothing wrong with the placenta, but eventually it did. We got it out, and then we had her in a bassinet and spent the rest of the day with her, which was lovely. And the strange thing, it wasn't till about, I mean, she was born at 29 minutes past 10. And it wasn't till about midday that we realised we ought to be taking some photographs of her. It hadn't occurred to us. So that's when we started taking some photographs. The midwife offered to do her hands and footprints, but I didn't want them to do that because I just didn't want them to mess about with her. She looked so fragile. So we didn't do that. The midwife washed her for us, and I wished I'd done that now, but you just don't know at the beginning. You just don't know. You've just got to go with the flow. But she was beautiful and she was perfect, and the post-mortem shows that she was perfect. We had a full post-mortem because we wanted to rule out that there was anything that I'd done or David, you know, a genetic reason or whatever, and that was all ruled out. So later on we were still spending time with her, and we hadn't named her, and we weren't going to name her, which is bizarre. But then I said, shall we name her? This was about 5 o'clock. Shall we name her? And Dave said, what do you want to call her? And I don't know where this name came from, because it's one that we'd never discussed before, and I just said Tilly. And he cried because he said that's exactly the name that had gone through his mind, which is just bizarre. And I don't believe in all this mumbo-jumbo rubbish, but I believe that somebody from upstairs was telling us that that's what we've got to call her. And then 3 seconds later the midwife came in and said, have you got a name? And we just literally that minute named her, so it was bizarre. But she was beautiful. But it's just horrendous. So sad. And it's hard for whatever stage you're going through, however you've got to that part of the pregnancy. But it just felt a real kick in the teeth that we'd been and had to have IVF, and it worked first time, and all our dreams had come true, and to be snatched away when we thought everything was plain sailing.